Subject 2, otherwise known as Subto, has been a hot new strategy in the real estate community recently.
I'm going to figure out how to do 300 or 400 of these deals.
I'll show you how to do this. This is easy.
I can do these deals endless.
Imagine never having to get a credit check. Imagine never having to go to a bank. We bought this subject to and seller finance. I've never lost a home to the due on sale clause. We just overcome it.
Sub 2 is just,
in a lot of ways, it sounds like a win.
I am going to dive into how I lost $180,000 on the subject to deal.
you're not allowed to perceive risk if you're going to be a real estate guy. And that's how I went broke.
Is this mentorship a scam? I would say that it is a scam.
Subto is not what you think it is. Why is nobody talking about this?
I leveraged up to my eyeballs on, had a bunch of short-term notes. The bank did the unthinkable and called my notes when they got sold to another bank.
This is Tanner, a real estate investor who lost $180,000 on a recent Subto deal. I think his story is just the beginning of a larger Subto bubble that's about to pop. So my name is Tim Pelt. I'm the owner of Wholesaling PPC, and it's an agency where we run a lot of ads for serious real estate investors who've been in the business a long time. And the stuff that they're telling me is very different from what I'm seeing online, so I'm here to bridge the gap and explain to you what's really going on in the market today. There's 5 growing risks of Subto that nobody's talking about. Like Tanner, everybody's flocking to Subto partially because of this guy, Pace Morby. He's the face of Subto with tons of social media content and a Subto program that has thousands of students in it. I'll let him explain as simply as possible what Subto is.
Okay, cool. So I've got a house. Seller lives in this house. Seller has 2 things. They have a mortgage, separate document, and they also have a deed. A deed is a receipt of ownership. 2 completely separate documents. I, Pace, or maybe you watching this in the video, where I would go to find a deal like this is I would call sellers that are on expired listings, people who have already tried to sell their house, but real estate agents failed to do so. We call this seller and we say, hey, looks like you tried to sell your house unsuccessfully. I'd love to just give you an offer of taking over the mortgage payments. Are you open to that? And I'd say 80% of the time, the answer is yes. Oh my gosh, I would love to do that. I do a lot of these stories on my YouTube channel. And the seller says, how does that work? I go, well, the mortgage stays in your name. You move out of the house and the deed gets transferred to my name through a title company. And the title company issues insurance to make sure that all the paperwork was done and everything was done legally. I now have official ownership. Owner of that property is now gone. They are no longer the owner. I am, and I can go find a tenant to go move in this house and make those payments on my behalf. That's subject to.
Yeah, it's still complicated to me, and that's part of the problem, which I will go into in more detail later. But we need to first address the biggest risk of losing money with Subto, which is exactly what happened to Tanner.
I just heard the buzzwords of seller finance, right? So 3% interest, things are moving, the cash flow looks great. I put my down payment of 110 down. I put 70 grand into finishing the basement so I could rent top bottom. About a month into my renters being in there, so it's fully leased, I get a letter saying that it's going to the auction. And that's where it started unfolding, right? So
the due on sale clause is in every mortgage that says if certain criteria is met, the bank has the right to call your entire loan amount due. Yes, you have to pay the bank the entire loan amount of the house right now. So back in the 1970s, the interest rates were going way up in the US. There was an oil crisis, among other things. You think interest rates are high today at 5, 6, 7%. In 1981, the interest rates peaked at over 18%. So in 1982, the Garn-St. Germain Federal Depositary Institutions Act was instituted, which essentially created the due on sale clause in all the mortgages that you see today. And the reason is because the interest rates were so high, people were doing these mortgage assumptions to bypass the high interest rates. This gave the banks a legal tool to be able to call the loan due so that they were no longer having to service, 4, 5, 6, 7% loans when now they could get 18% on their money or more. But with interest rates going up and inventory being so low, it's very hard to find those kinds of deals today. And Subto has become a really popular way to be able to buy real estate with low or no money out of your pocket. The problem is interest rates have gone up over 10 times in the last couple years. So the idea that the due on sale clause won't ever be called may have been true for the last decade, but the circumstances that led to the creation of the due on sale clause back in the 1980s are now becoming parallel today. Now, why would a bank who can get 6 or 7% on their money continue to loan to somebody at a 2 or 3% interest rate? Basically, there's this idea that the due on sale clause won't ever be called. It's just not true. Just because Pace Morby said
there's a technical way to overcome the due on sale clause. I've never lost a home to the due on sale clause. We just overcome it.
You've never had to pay one off?
No.
Nobody's ever pressed you?
I've never heard one person in my life ever having to pay one off.
And not a lot of people are talking about this. Most of the videos online about Subto are very positive, how you can make a lot of money with no money out of pocket, how you can find all these great deals.
The front of it makes it seem like it's a lot easier than it is, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But I will say there is more risk today because of the attention that's thrown into it and because of a higher interest rate environment.
That's myth number one. The due on sale clause won't ever be called. Now that you understand, it's more likely now than in the last 40 years that the due on sale clause will be called. Now, granted, it will depend on the state because, if the bank is going to call the loan due and you can't pay it, they're going to foreclose on you, which is expensive, and banks don't want to foreclose on properties. So in some states like Arizona, it may be easier for a bank to foreclose on you than something like maybe New York or even California. So it does depend on your state. The risk in certain states will be much greater than others. Okay, do your own research there. Number two, you can get insurance for due on sale. There was a company that Pace Morby mentioned in the past called, I think it was Equity Assurance. No longer exists today. And even when it did exist, it wasn't a true insurance company. It was people pulling a bunch of money together. And then when something bad would happen to one, it would basically get just paid out. So it was like a pseudo insurance company, but there's literally no insurance that you can get for a due on sale clause.
So this is my knowledge of it, which I think is actually a great point to what you're trying to do here, is I heard it was a thing. And in the Subto community, which I'm a part of, there was a thread about it, right? Like, is this still a thing? Where is it at? Where can I find more information? And the entire sentiment of all the comments was that it is no longer a business. And if it is no longer a business, that people cannot stand behind the risk associated, to me, that's a red flag.
Number three, if you don't tell the banks, they won't find out. This is frankly not true. This is what Tanner thought when he got into his deal, and he doesn't even know how the bank found out, but they did.
Like, I don't know what specific thing caught the eyes of the bank in this deal. And they won't tell you. They'll never tell you.
And I guarantee you, the higher the interest rates go, banks are going to be more likely to look into these loans to see where they can increase their profits. Banks, after all, are a business. Look, if your investment strategy is relying on hiding information from a bank, it's probably not the best investment strategy. Let's be real. Number four, Subto is easy for beginners. This one, I don't understand.
And we could talk about this for hours. This is great.
Yeah.
So
I want to figure out how to do 300 or 400 of these deals.
I'll show you how to do this. This is easy.
Honestly, very complicated. And I'll be honest, I'm not a Subto expert. I don't want to do Subto deals. I don't understand the paperwork. I don't have the patience. Read through all the paperwork. I don't have a legal background, and most other investors don't, especially beginners. But Subto deals are not that straightforward.
I think the difference with Subto and some of these other strategies, like let's compare it to seller financing or let's compare it to Burr, is that there is a written handbook on what you can and can't do. Like seller financing, probably a little bit, that's a worse example, right? But with Burr, you're not doing anything too intricate. I feel like with Subto, you're almost like an Inspector Gadget. Like you're like this detective. That's the better word. Yeah. You're a detective trying to figure out the answers, and no one can tell you the exact answers.
And when a deal falls apart, just saying, well, I guess I should have understood the paperwork better is kind of a cop-out, because I don't think a lot of people, especially beginners, are ever going to understand the ins and outs of the paperwork, and subject to deals can get very complicated And I think that's very much swept under the rug in a lot of these sub 2 hype videos out there. Pace Morby isn't the only one talking about sub 2. He's definitely the leader of it, but there's a lot of people jumping on the sub 2 bandwagon.
I think, especially in the real estate side, which I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I think Pace Morby is a marketer. He throws out a lot of attention grabbing media, which can get people in trouble. I will 100% say that it can get people in trouble. But if you had like an hour session with Pace of how to do a sub 2 deal, he wouldn't make it seem as simple as maybe a 40-second clip does.
I think it's becoming way overhyped. The true risk of sub 2 deals is being completely ignored. And I think a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money coming up, and it's already starting to happen. Look, there's a conflict of interest in the social media game about promoting sub 2. Ever since the creation of the sub 2 course from Pace Morby, they make millions and tens of millions of dollars from this course. So I understand that Pace Morby does have experience and does a lot of deals and has a lot of successful students. I'm not trying to bash his sub 2 program at all, but you have to understand that whenever they frame sub 2 deals and frame the risk of it, you have to understand that there's a conflict of interest, potentially underemphasizing the downsides of sub 2 and overemphasizing the positives of it. How do you think that people who want to do sub 2 should analyze risk appropriately?
Putting less money down, having a creative, which that comment says a top tier transaction coordinator, is huge. So be very, very cautious of what loan product you're taking over. Having a title company that you trust and on your team is massive.
If they can sell you that sub 2 is a great strategy, they can get you to join the Subto coaching program or other coaching programs, or maybe they're an affiliate for Subto or whatever. So you have to be very careful with who you trust for information, and it's good to get both sides of the story. And that's why this channel exists, so that I can give you another perspective, because I don't have any coaching, I don't sell any programs. I have a free course that goes over literally everything I do in my agency, so you don't even have to hire me. If you're a serious investor doing real deals, I'd love to chat with you, but a lot of you aren't, and that's fine. I'm not gonna work with 99.9% of you, and that's completely fine. So I hope this video can give you another perspective and help you think a little bit more critical before you take on these big high stakes Subto deals. The risk profile of your next Subto deal may be a lot higher than it was just a few years ago. And don't wait to offload your risky Subto deals until after the bubble bursts, because by then it's gonna be too late.